How's it going, guys? It's Avi from Mars One Shop 1000. Today is July 2nd, 2020, as we enter the month of July, which doesn't really get all that active just yet, but it's still active enough to where we will see probably multiple tropical storms this month, especially since this year is expected to be well above average. But let's take a look at the 5-day tropical weather outlook for right now, and as you can see, no new tropical cyclones are expected during the next 5 days. Now, I know I said last video that there's a tropical disturbance that could form in the southeast, and that still could have a chance of form. Like, I won't rule it out just yet because the forecast definitely could change where the low pressure is pushed further to the east, and or maybe that when as the days go on, the National Hurricane Center will list it as having a chance of developing, because maybe the forecast the National Hurricane Center or the forecast models are predicting is that this will develop beyond 5 days, which gets very iffy when we get beyond 5 days out, which is the reason why the National Hurricane Center only forecasts within 5 days out in terms of the chances of tropical cyclone development. But as of right now, the forecast model has been leading more and more towards a less likely chance to developing this thing, at least in the near future. And I think the main reason why is because GFS is currently taking the disturbance that's expected to form in the southeast more over land than before, because in the past couple runs it was more just out to sea, more just off the coast of the Carolinas and Georgia. But it seems like in this run the GFS is favoring more of an inland track where the Carolinas and Georgia will get a little bit more rain, and this won't really develop into anything because obviously it's going to be disconnected from the water, and it won't really develop into a tropical cyclone as a result, due to GFS as the GFS model states. So if we move forward, I would say, yeah, the disturbance that the GFS was before predicting to develop into a tropical storm is currently over Alabama based off the GFS model. It's about 4 days out. We see a lot of rain completely swallowing the Florida Panhandle, Georgia, and Alabama as well. So keep that in mind, because I think the bigger risk with this tropical disturbance is a potential flood threat throughout Florida, the southeast, and maybe extending to the Carolinas, because I noticed that this low pressure, as it moves up north, sort of gets trapped by a huge ridge over the U.S., and it's not until we see a little bit of a dip in the jet stream just out to Atlantic where the GFS starts to steer out to sea, but it stays over the Carolinas for several days and even impacting Virginia. So we may see an enhanced risk of flooding in this area as a result of this storm just lingering over the same area. However, this days out, this could easily change because I'm going 7 days out at this point. So that forecast does get a little bit iffy, but the GFS is favoring this to slow down as a result of this pretty strong ridge over southern Canada and the northern portions of the United States. But if we take a look within the forecast hour, that we're seeing mostly rain all throughout the Florida Panhandle and a lot of thunder shower activity in that area, and we're seeing a lot of rain over Georgia, Alabama, and we could see an enhanced flooding threat. If we take a look at the rainfall forecast over the next 5 days, it extends from July 3rd, 2020 to July 8th, 2020. You see that localized areas in Florida could receive over 4 inches of rain. So this is definitely something to keep in mind in Florida, Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, all throughout the Gulf Coast states pretty much, and even extending towards the east coast of Florida in the along the Atlantic coast, where we could see a pretty heavy rain, a pretty big heavy rain throughout the southeast. And if you live in a poor drainage area, or if you live in an area that's known to for flooding, especially in times where it doesn't even rain that much relatively, you definitely need to keep watching this and prepare if you're near a flood if you're near a flood area that's very prone to flooding. So definitely keep that in mind if you're along the Gulf Coast, because you could see a lot of rain from this tropical disturbance, whether this develops or not. And at this point, it seems unlikely that it's going to develop. If we take a look at the European model, while it's also taking sort of a land track, it develops it, but it develops it far later than the 5-day time frame. So if we take a look at what the GFS model states, so this as of right now, we see a little bit of a dip of the jet stream, but we see a huge ridge just dominating the US right now, bringing near record high temperatures all throughout the United States, extending from the Midwest even all the way to the Northeast. So if we continue to move forward, that ridge sort of stays over sort of stays over the northern United States, and there's a little bit of energy beginning to form just around the Gulf Coast states as a result of this low pressure system. And also a couple of troughs moving through the Midwest might transfer a little bit of instability and energy towards this area, to where a low pressure system could develop without Baronclinic influences as soon as that energy moves into the Gulf Coast, where it's going to encounter warmer water and warmer temperatures, to where this low pressure will be enhanced by the daytime heating that creates rapid evaporation during the summer. So if we continue to move forward, you see a little bit of energy here. It isn't enough energy to where the European model will classify it as a low pressure system, but you see the orange right here, that represents cooler temperatures at the 500 millibar mark. And when there's cooler temperatures in the summer, it likely means that there's a lot of convection, especially when we're seeing the oranges this far south. We're seeing rainfall in that region, and the clouds are blocking the sun from hitting the ground, which means lower temperatures in the summer. It's a complete opposite in the winter, where when it's raining or when there's precipitation, it's more likely to be warmer because all the air in the surface is moving towards the low pressure system. And since there's so much air along the surface moving towards that low pressure system with a lot of energy, that increases the temperature in the winter. However, in the summer, what mainly determines how hot it will be during the day is how much sunlight the surface will take. And usually when there's a lot of clouds of rain, that means the temperatures are usually going to be cooler than average in the summer. So if we continue to move on, we see that low pressure system develop just off the coast of North Carolina, going 7 days out. And that's something I want to point out, because things could easily change when it comes to the forecast and whether this develops or not. Because if the ridge that's expected to develop just off the coast of the southeast, let me pull up the GFS model to show you guys where exactly that ridge will form. Let it load up, and let me get the 200 millibar wind forecast. I'll give a good idea to show you where the ridge is located. And so this is as of July 3rd, and you could obviously see that there's a lot of wind shear through this region. However, it's over a fairly light wind shear area, which means that if this does go over water, it's likely to develop. Now, there's still questions about the dry air and stuff, but usually when there's light wind shear, it means that tropical cyclone development is more likely. Obviously, dry air is going to be something to watch, especially with the Saharan desert air approaching the southeast earlier this week. So we definitely need to keep in mind of that. But if we continue to move forward, it seems like by the 5th, this is where the ridge currently is, and it's a little bit further south and a little bit too far to the west to really steer this storm out to sea, or to let the storm pretty much steer itself out into the sea. If this was a little bit more towards the If this was a little bit more towards the east, that would give the storm a little bit more of a chance to go over water and strengthen. However, it's currently a little bit too far to the west to really do anything over land, and it'll remain pretty much just a tropical cyclone. And then that ridge, and the worry is that that ridge sort of blocks this disturbance from pretty much going along with the westerlies and completely moving out to sea quickly, as it kind of forces the storm to go a little bit more towards the north, and then it slows it down as a result. And since while you can't see it here definitively, there's a little bit of a ridge over here. So this ridge is actually going to be the reason why there's more likely to stay over land, since it's pretty much going to block it from just taking a straight westerly direction, and instead push it a little bit more north to where the ridge that's currently over the Great Lakes region will pretty much make it linger over the Carolinas, and that's a worry. But however, so either way, it might be bad in both scenarios, because if this does move further to the west, while it's less likely to linger over the US at that point, I mean, if this ridge moves a little bit further to the east, while it's less likely that the low pressure would stay over the US for a long time, it's more likely that it will develop, because if this moves further to the east, the high pressure will likely steer it further to the east, and as a result go over water. It could potentially develop at that point. However, it's more likely to go out to sea, which is good news. However, if this lingers more to the east, while this won't develop, it's more likely to linger over the mid-Atlantic and southeast. So either way, it seems bad. To be honest, I would rather take this ridge going a little bit further to the east, because that means the storm will move quicker, and although it does have more of a chance to develop, it will probably move out to sea too quickly to create any major impacts along the coast. So I think if this ridge moves a little bit more to the west, while it's more likely to develop, it's more likely to move faster, which is good news. But as of right now, the GFS is taking more of a slower and not developing tracks, which is a little bit of a worry when it comes to rainfall. And the GFS and the Europeans moving it a little bit faster and also strengthening it. And as it strengthens it, it's going to move out to sea, which is good news, which would be the best case scenario in my opinion in this case. But let's take a look, since it's July now, let's take a look at the average forecast tracks. Not the forecast, the typical tracks tropical cyclones would usually take in July, and they generally go through this general area where we might see a tropical cyclone develop right around the Caribbean islands, and then could potentially move up north into the mid-Atlantic and along the east coast. And there's also possibilities where we could see tropical cyclones develop in July. However, it's obviously less likely during this month, mainly due to the strong wind shear that's going to prevail over the Atlantic still in July. It's not until August and September where we see that wind shear, and also the dry air begins to wind down, where the hurricane season would be more active. So although these tracks certainly take a direction towards landfall, it's unlikely that so many storms will develop to where it'll become a major problem. And if it does develop, it's likely going to be weak, because there's just too much wind shear and not enough latent heat in the ocean just yet to make storms insanely powerful. There are exceptions, however. We saw obviously Hurricane Dennis, I think, pretty much take nearly this exact track straight towards the Gulf of Mexico on July 10th, 2005, right around where Ivan made landfall, and Dennis made landfall as a strong Cat 3, which is surprising for July. And we also saw Hurricane Emily, which strengthened into Category 5 in 2005, just a couple days after Dennis. So there are exceptions. However, for the most part, tropical cyclones should be fairly weak in July, and there won't be that many to where it will become it's likely to become a widespread problem. However, keep in mind, don't underestimate these storms, because even tropical storms could dump a lot of rain and cause flooding. And the number one cause of death during hurricanes is flooding and storm surge. And tropical storms could definitely bring a lot of rain and inland flooding, even though they're weak. So definitely keep that in mind, and don't underestimate these tropical storms as well. If you take a look at the sea surface temperature anomaly, we see that it's mostly warm throughout the main development regions, whether it's in July or August, where the main development region between Western Africa and the Caribbean islands is hyperactive usually. So that's definitely worrying when it comes to the hurricane season, since we're more likely to see more convection in hurricanes in this region as a result of this higher latent heat in the ocean. However, I've also been noticing that the northern Atlantic been warming up extremely quick. I remember back in not even May, back in like early June, a lot of the North Atlantic was cooler than average. Now we're seeing those temperatures spike up throughout the northern Atlantic, and that actually might be good news, because if we see more convection in an area where it's hurricanes typically don't form, then we're more likely to maybe see sinking air in the main development region, since we're seeing a lot of convection and rising motion in this area. So that might be good news that we're seeing a warming in this area, although it might increase the names of storms, such as last year, where we saw a bunch of subtropical cyclones because of how much warmer than average the sea surface temperatures were in the northern Atlantic. Those subtropical cyclones aren't really huge and major to land, and most of them go out to sea fairly quickly, and they're fairly weak most of the time. So it might be good news we're seeing a warming in the northern Atlantic, but however, I still expect a hyperactive season, potentially record-breaking as a result of this warmer than average sea surface temperatures throughout the main development region, and the La Nina that potentially could form later during the year. And yeah, prepare for this hurricane season now. But anyways, guys, I thank you guys for watching. Make sure to subscribe for more content, and I hope you guys have a good day and a good night.